in this moment of time, I'd like to thank the rest of you all who are here. The senior professors of Faculty of Medicine, the surgical professors, the senior doctors, staff nurses, endoscopy nurses, the nursing staff, the MOs, everybody. Thank you for being here. Let us proceed. I would like to introduce our guest of honor today. He hails from Singapore. His name is Mr. Dr. Vaikuntan Rajaratnam. He's gonna present to us a talk, which I will introduce. Before that, let me introduce briefly about this Dr. Vaikuntan. Dr. Vaikuntan graduated from University of Malaya in 1980. He's a batchmate of Professor Goh. So it must be a good friend too. He's an orthopedic surgeon by training at UMMC. Otherwise, why would he be here? And later on, he pursued his training as an advanced plastic and end microsurgery in UK as well in US. He commenced as an academic lecturer in UM in 1986. Then he has worked in several subspecialties in UK before coming back to Singapore in 2011 as a senior consultant microsurgery and hand surgery. Currently, he works at the Khoo Teck Puat Hospital in Singapore. It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Vaikuntan Rajaratnam to present his lecture.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be back in the university. This is a rare year. It's the first time, twice this year I've come to the university. I must thank Prof Sanjeev for inviting me to come and celebrate with my good friend KL Goh. I can call him my good friend. He's, I don't know. Did you put it up? Oh, sorry. I'll let, I did email my slide to Sanjeev. You don't have it? No, I didn't bring my thumb drive. It's okay.
Just have to talk for 5 minutes before.
Yes, can no worry. Yeah, I'll let him do some work. It's yeah. Well, I'll keep you entertained. It is good to be back. In terms of coming to Malaysia, I enjoy. I'm a self-confessed hedonistic addict to the Epicurean delights of Malaysia has to offer, and Professor KL Goh is my liaison to seek and deliver the purveyors of good char siu and siu yok. And the last time we had lunch was at Amada. Has got a very good char siu. So for those, I'll let you know that. But seriously, as I sat and thought about, Sanjeev said I have to say a few words here. And amidst this august audience of gastroenterologists, these are the psychomotor, not the psychomotor skills, they are the cognitive specialists as compared to me surgeons who function at a subtentoral level. So it was a great task trying to think about what to say. And frankly, personally, I don't believe in evidence-based medicine, but you have to pretend to be evidence-based. So I did try and collect a few things to try and prove that there is some evidence-based. But KL and I go back a long time from medical school days. Not that long. I'm not that old. But one of the ways to remain young is to mix with young people. So I make sure my nights out are with students and residents, so you stay young. One of the things I learned from KL Goh is there's a phenomena known as collateral acclaim and fame. So when I was in the UK, I spent a decade in the UK, I met a very pretty resident or registrar in medicine. We started chatting, and interest was in gastroenterology. So I said, oh, a good friend of mine is a gastroenterologist. And I mentioned KL Goh's name, and she said, oh, you know him? So suddenly I became very close to her because of KL Goh. Don't worry, nothing happened. And then a few years ago, when I just arrived in Singapore and I was conducting in Singapore, they tell you it's a 5-day week, but actually it's a 6-day week. All workshops are done on a Saturday. So Saturday I'm in the hospital. I come from a small hospital in a remote village of Yishun in the northern part of Singapore. It's a Sleepy Hollow. So I was doing my workshop on a Saturday morning, and then I saw this big pageantry of people in robes with mortarboard and all that. And KL Goh was walking by. So I came out, and he obviously didn't see me. And as he walked past, I said, is that Professor Dato Dr KL Goh from PJ? He's from CPAC, PJ. But his name is KL Goh. So he said, yes. And then there were the leadership of my hospital, all the senior, the CMB, and everybody were there. And then he obviously came across and took a photograph together. And ever since then, the leadership in my hospital gives me great respect. So this I call, collateral, as you have collateral damage in Syria, you have collateral acclaim and fame just being around KL Goh. And for the younger people, let me give you advice, just hang around him. There is a phenomenon of collateral damage or collateral knowledge. Just hanging around long enough is enough for you to gain knowledge. Because the attitude component of training is something that you only see by spending enough time. And I grew a beard as a houseman because I was Professor Ashok Menon's house officer. And if those of you remember Professor Ashok Menon, he's a great diagnostician and a great comedian. And I admired him so much so that I grew a beard. And till today, I maintain that beard. So it is important, and that is what is failure of the training program now, is the lack of apprenticeship. So if you go back to the days of Hippocrates, how did you train as a physician? You lived with the physician for 10 to 15 years. You cooked for him, you washed his clothes. And then at the end of 15 years, he slapped you on the back and he sent you off to go and practice medicine. And that is the part of the apprenticeship program. I do apologize for this. Is it? Yep, excellent. Right, so how do I stand before this august audience and claim locus standi to talk about an academic as Professor KL Goh? So I'm not an academic, right? I'm a village surgeon from Yishun. So I looked back very hard to find what would make me able to stand and talk about KL Goh. No problem, it's my fault. So the only thing I think I stand here before this audience that gives me the locus standi in keeping with Aristotle's framework of ethos, pathos, and logos, if you want to engage in discourse. I was the bottom half of the class that made KL Goh look good. That was my standard 5 position, 40 upon 40. I came home, and my mother said, what is this? And I said, I got full marks for position. So she gave me an apple, and my father came back and slapped me. But more than that, I'm a pensioner. So I took early retirement at age 55 and came to Singapore. The offer was very simple, 70% more pay, 70% less tax. When I called up Prof Bala, who was my mentor, was a former academic at the university in Singapore, he said, boy, go and do an MRI. I said, why, Prof? Nobody offers you a job at age 55. Pack and come. So I came. So that's my ethos, right? So I have a standing here to tell KL Goh because I am a pensioner who receives a monthly pension from Her Majesty the Queen, and so therefore you have to listen to me. Okay, your life is going to change. All right? Life is going to change. This is a major event, and it's not an easy event. I've done research on this, partly for my own reasons, and I prepare myself for those days. As a surgeon, unlike physicians who mature with old age as wine, but surgeons, we have a lifespan. So I'm still learning. I'm doing my doctoral thesis to do something else after surgery. So that's KL Goh. I think everybody has said this, but KL Goh, you need to sort your research gate out. Your research gate profile needs a lot of work. So I had to put the picture for him. This is from ResearchGate. It's an independent. I have links with ResearchGate. My son works for ResearchGate. It's one of the most published from ResearchGate, 362 with significant publication. I don't need to go through that. But I checked the website, the 281 professors. Truly, I think KL Goh is one of the top. And if you follow that, in terms of, he hasn't reached 6 sigma, but at least 3 sigma. I mean, these are statistical terms. P is overrated, by the way. P 0.05 is totally overrated. Truly a candidate, definitely for emeritus professor, but I also think for Professor Ulong. Don't you think so? Yeah. I find that you, as in a career for the younger people, you have 4 decades in your career as a clinician. In the first decade, you spend your time developing your skills and your practice. You get trained, and then the second decade, you go on to do your mastery, to master yourself in the specialty that you've taken. And in the third decade, you leave your legacy. And Prof Goh has obviously left his legacy from what I hear and what I know. I may sit quietly in a remote village, but I know a lot of things that are happening. And in the fourth decade, you reinforce your legacy not within your confines of your kampong, but beyond. So I'm also going through my end of my third decade. We're same age, going on to the fourth decade. So we're doing a lot of work in Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, mainly in the training of surgeons elsewhere. And we are just in the midst of publishing our work in Cambodia after 5 years, where we are able to provide sustainable training for the local people to improve healthcare. So what is life after academia? Academia is great in the ivory tower. And this is one of the studies from the Royal Society that showed what happens to PhDs, what happens to academics. So a lot of them do go back to industry, go back to a lot of other things. But it is something that needs to be prepared, and it is not easy. I'm not an academic, but I have worked with academics who have retired, and I know what they go through. Incidentally, I must also say this, that I'm going to take a bit of credit for KL Goh's success, because, and also complain about how he destroyed my career in medicine. So KL Goh we all did our housemanship in University Hospital. In those days, the top 10% of the class and the bottom 10% of the class were chosen to do housemanship in University Hospital. I don't know which top, I think most likely bottom top. He was obviously the top. So he and my wife were housemen in medicine. And I was houseman in surgery, first posting, second posting, going on to medicine. And they were housemen to Florence Wang. Is Florence Wang here? No. Hope not. I'll say it anyway. So Florence Wang was a meticulous physician, and I dreaded wanting to go to her ward. So I told my wife, who then told KL Goh, that I was fearful of being posted to a ward. And the two of them told Florence Wang. And Florence Wang then chose me to be a houseman. I was quite interested in medicine, but after 3 months in Florence Wang's ward, that was it. Complete destruction for any form of liking to medicine. So that's his fault. Anyway, I hope most physicians would have read this Harvard Grant study. The Harvard Grant study is a very important study, the longest longitudinal study in the world, 75 years of 238 Harvard men. The conclusion of the study is pretty clear, that the warmth of relationship throughout life impact on life satisfaction. So the my V is not important. All right? So the most important thing is actually the relationships that you build, that whether it be not just family relationships, but in terms of training, in terms of people that you teach. And so that's a great privilege in terms of the things that you have to do. So this is an important study to remember. And if you look at KL Goh's life, his satisfaction, his fulfillment is not in the material possession of things that he has. They also said they have got better sex life. I don't know. TG Loh is not here, Tiamgi. Professor Loh told us when we were in final year, one of the Friday CPCs, we all came, Friday afternoon CPCs, all we are interested to know what the diagnosis is. We spent the whole week looking at the case, and we came there, and then we waited, and Prof TG Loh stood up, and then suddenly he had got this dissociative cognitive dissonance, He suddenly said, instead of talking about, we thought it was Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, everybody was discussing, and then he stood up and said, when you're young, you have a machine gun and no opportunity. And then when you reach my age, you have opportunity, but you only have a pea shooter. I don't know what he meant, but I think when you reach our age, you find that certain parts of your anatomy have got not much function. They got no recreational, procreational, or micturational use at all. So, what happens after academia? I think the most part of your life is in clinical work. As a clinician, I got attention deficit disorder. As you would know, my attention span is very short. I only can spend about 10 years in a country. So every 10 years I move countries. So now I'm in Singapore 5 years. I suppose I got another 5 more years. You find that I did 15 years of private practice. I left the university, academia, partly for personal reasons, partly because of problems in academia. I resigned in 24 hours because when you're young, you're brash. I started hand surgery in this hospital, and one day a 10-year-old child was referred from Kanga Perlis to have a replantation of a thumb, and I was told that we had no anesthetic time. Prof Gracie, I think he's gone, but they said that they were cesarean to do, and we couldn't do it, and then I resigned 24 hours. I went to private practice, made my money, most expensive surgeon in town, but it never provided satisfaction. Authenticity at work is an important component for the maintenance of well-being. And my wife made me watch. I told my wife that I got to come here and speak about KL Goh. They were very good friends, my wife and KL Goh. So she made me watch a 1-hour interview that KL Goh had on some YouTube. And I sat there. Last week I was in London with her, so we were watching the tube together. And one of the things that he said was the self-alienation that you had to achieve this success, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, reading and writing papers. And the other thing that they found in this study was work in accordance to your belief system. I'm just telling you, private practice is not the place to go, KL Goh. And you have to accept external influences. There's only one thing in your life that you have control over, and that's your mind. You have nothing else you can control. You cannot control your work hours, you cannot control your promotion, you cannot control. That's the system. You either like the system or you go and find another system. So satisfaction in life, in pre-retirement, is all about health. In post-retirement, especially as an academic, research and creative work is what's all about. And the use of voluntary work. So I think it's time for KL Goh to look beyond the boundaries of University Hospital. Woodlands Medical Centre and Hospital is opening. I'm empowered to give you an offer. So we looked at surgeons recently, just hot off the press. We just published this last week. We found that mandatory retirement age for surgeons is generally, we found a perception is wrong. Mandatory retirement age is sometimes you can't help it. That's what academia is all about. That doesn't mean you retire. Actually, life begins after your retirement because you got no longer the constraints of grant writing and the various constraints that you have. Unfortunately for surgeons, there is evidence at age 70 your psychomotor skills go down. So that's why I'm doing my PhD in education so I can get out of here and do something else when I can't operate. As an educator, obviously, KL Goh is a great educator, so I will beseech him and encourage him to continue without the constraints of academia. And teaching doesn't have... I love teaching, though I'm not an academic, so I consider myself a teacher with no students. In the remote village of Yishun, very few students. But I have students all over the world. So going online to teach. So the creation, there's a big phenomena. So last year I finished a master's in instructional design and technology. So open educational resources is the way forward. And the wealth and wisdom that KL Goh has, it's time for him to convert that to open educational resources, allow for universal access, and teach everybody in the world. Now everyone can learn. So how do you do research without being in academia? You can. ResearchGate, I'm not paid by ResearchGate, I can assure you, provides you the avenue and platform to help and assist people to do research through your wisdom. Because at this moment in time, you don't need to do the hands-on research. It's to provide the wisdom and to provide the questions. So, but 14 years ago, I met this guy on ResearchGate. He's a Sri Lankan surgical trainee doing his master's. He wanted some help. So I supervised him on his master's from the UK, never met him before. And 2 years ago, then he passed out. He became a faculty of the University of Paradena in surgery. I went over to Paradena to run a workshop. And that's how the collaboration helps to achieve certain things. So how do you excel post-academia? So there's still place for excellence. Kaizen, the Japanese concept that you can never become perfect. You're continuously in the journey. And so post-academia, there is a lot of scope. And I will still bring back to the idea of open online courses. There are a lot of things, especially with KL Goh's background in the leadership in gastroenterology in the region, is to start thinking of programs internationally. How do you future-proof your academic life? One of the things to do is, I always say that I can predict the future. How you predict the future, you make your future happen. So tonight, I'm going to have dinner with KL Goh. I know that because I'm going to make it happen. So you have to plan for it. You plan for your post-academia, or you plan to not have it at all. The way to look for is, I stopped reading hand surgery journals because I find it a bore. So I read technology journals. I read what's happening latest in technology. So what's the future in medicine? So medicine is all about pattern recognition, Gestalt learning. So today they're using the IBM Watson. They're combined with Eisenhower, one of the groups in the US, where they're looking at language scripting, voice recognition, and the narrative medicine to bring about diagnosis and healthcare that is precise, personalized, predictive, and promotive. So that's something that KL Goh needs to think about. The wealth of academia that he has achieved, work with instructional designers, work with technologies and technology, and how you can bring that to improve healthcare. My master's thesis, so I got that published, was in the creation of online community of practice. Is to develop an online community of practice for you to continue your work and to leave that extended legacy beyond the shores of Malaysia. I like this, not that I read this journal, but I found this quotation. Nature, I wouldn't even know how to read it half the time, don't know what's written in there. But I like what this guy is, this guy is a real scientist, Seymour Benzer, molecular genetics, the real guys. If half the people think you're crazy, then go ahead and do it, KL Goh. Right? It's never good to conform. And most important, we must thank Teo Su Lin. And behind every man is a woman. And behind every man's failure is also a woman. We all can, and I'm sure Malaysians can recognize that, isn't it? Your leadership. But I want to take credit here. When they got married and Su Lin was coming to Subang Medical, I used to work in Subang Medical Centre at the time, and I told them both, they will probably deny this, but I will tell them both, was that, Su Lin, you go out and make the money, because gastroenterologists cannot make money in private compared to eye surgeon. He stay back and do academia, and that's what they did. So I take credit for that. Thank you.
I hope all of you agree. This was a very hilarious and wonderful lecture from Dr. Vaikuntan. We will move on. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker is our guest of honor, Professor Lawrence Ho. Again, a brief introduction about Professor Lawrence Ho. Professor Lawrence Ho is a famous gastroenterologist in Asia Pacific and worldwide. He is currently the chair and the senior consultant at the Department of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at the National University of Singapore. He graduated from the University of Sydney. I don't know the years. Yeah. Wouldn't mention it. Don't mention it. Yeah. He undertook training in therapeutic GI endoscopy and also endoscopic ultrasonography in US, University of Pennsylvania, and is currently the chair of many board. It will bore you if I tell you everything. The most important one, the most famous one is that is the president of the Asian Endoscopic Ultrasound Group. Is also a chair of Barrett Consortium in Singapore. He has done a lot of publication, a lot of research in the field of gastroenterology. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Lawrence Ho.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm actually very honored to be here. In some ways, I should not use the word celebrating the retirement. Basically, to honor a great man whom I respect very much, Prof KL Goh. So indeed, I first met KL, in fact, in Singapore. At the time, I just came back from I would say from New Zealand, and through my mentor, who is somebody I think very close to KL Goh, Kan Jin Yong, I sort of met up with him. He at the time was coming down to give us a talk in our Gastro Society meeting, and then I knew at that time that I think this is somebody who will be very strong academically in the Asian Pacific region. In fact, I think at that time, Kan Jin Yong was a person who is the most, I would say, is most, in terms of academia, is most advanced. And then, unfortunately, he left for UK, and the vacuum was clearly filled, no doubt, by KL Goh. And so I've been following him, and in some way trying to be as good as him. Obviously, I never was. And so I decided, in some ways, to detract myself and doing other things in the meanwhile. Some of those things I'm going to share with you, but mostly to tell you that I think all of us certainly have, in some way in our life, follow somebody. We have our own role models. And then the role models I think I get from KL is to actually think beyond your own country, your own center, but to look at a play field, which I think is bigger than what our actually ability can contain. I must say, Waikuta, Kutepwat is not a small village hospital. So I think the play field is actually bigger than we can imagine. I think KL clearly has carved himself a very significant play field. He looks at Asia and he looks at it as something that he can actually expand his capability. And that's something that I actually learned a lot from working with KL. So I think today I'm just going to actually basically describe some of my own experiences. And also at the same time, I think hopefully I can also let people's mind go wild. Because a lot of the things going to be spoken here will be a bit futuristic. But mostly to let people know, I think there's a lot of potential in academia. So I think I hope KL will continue to be very active in academia. So I think when we look at endoscopy, I think Sanjeev told us about endoscopy. We can scope anybody. And certainly I think, in fact, it's not really something which is that evil, as Sanjeev put it. endoscopy is but a way, it's a camera, which we need to look at. Because I think if you look at, by nature, we are all clinicians. We have to do diagnosis, we have to do treatment. So how do we do it? I think we went to medical school, and the professors will tell us, very simple, you just use everything you have, the 5 senses. You smell, you listen, you palpate, you percuss, everything. And finally, use your best mind to put all these findings together, come up with a diagnosis. So I think same with gastroenterology. We have to make diagnosis, but we can't because we cannot go inside. So I think that's where the evolution of endoscopy came about. And then it allows us to now put the eyes inside. So the scope is just a camera going inside. And obviously, I think that's only allows us to do diagnosis. But further than that, we started having to deal with problems when you see problems. So again, the endoscopy provided a conduit for us to do treatment. So that's where I think it's just the way it is. If you think about that, Japan became giant, no surprise, because it's giant for all the camera companies. The Olympus, Canon, whatever, Fujinon. So they were all big camera companies. So I think it came from Japan, and the entire mindset, if you think about that, follow that order. So the order of the giant camera company carved our potential. So that's where sometimes you cannot believe why certain things happen in the history of mankind. It just happened because something actually carved the dimension. The cameras actually lead on to endoscopy. And then the endoscopies became very strong in Japan, and they just influenced the entire generation of endoscopies until more recently. So I think when we look at endoscopy, we always know they're different. Again, going back to basic, the 3 components. We always remember endoscopy is just an interface. I think for those people who knows about everything about technology, it's but an interface. You got patient, who is most important. And you have the operator, the doctors there, and in the between, you have to figure out how do we actually go into the patient. And this is a part, a lot of effort and money has been spent. But sometimes we forget that the operator also plays a very, very vital part. As technology becomes more and more complex, we become less and less actually comfortable with doing a lot of things. So I think that's where training became progressively more challenging. And I think we need mentors, clearly, and mentors actually make the training easy. I think KL actually sent me some of the articles about the training programs in the MU. And certainly, I think I look at the whole thing, I say, wow, he did a lot for many trainees, both locally as well as internationally. And this is something I think no technology can replace, because even if you have spent a lot of effort and time in coming up with technology, but ultimately the person, the users, have to be good in maximizing the yield from this technology. So I think to that, I think he has really done a lot. And just going back, I think we used to be there behind the West in terms of training. But I think recently we've been very fortunate, because I think with whatever reasons, we are slowly catching up, because there's a need to catch up with the training in order to put us on par of the advances in technology. And this is where I think Suresh mentioned a bit about the AAG. And I must say that KL actually has been very supportive of this thing. From beginning, I think we formed this in 2013. I think he got wind of this thing by 2014. And straight away, he volunteered Malaysia to be his guinea pig. In fact, it is the first one, the first workshop for AEG to be in Malaysia. Can you imagine that? We were actually trying to form this group, and then we were trying to get so-called the trainers and trainees all sorted out. And by 2014, I think even 2013 December, we held our first inaugural workshop. And it was actually in KL. I think Ida will probably remember. Yeah, I think I won't tell you the story behind. So Ida have to say, write to me to say that we will have to organize this. So I think after that, I think the waves of this sort of training workshop just went wild. And we clearly anchor this AEG as the signature training program in the Asia Pacific for EUS. So I think the strategy as we evolve, I think clearly is quite attractive because we didn't know that behind everything else, we were actually adopting the Uber technology at that time. So essentially is we got people who are interested to train and people who need training, and we put them together all over Asia Pacific, and we match it. We have a central station to match all these people, and we fly people all over the place. And so I think we could match the basic people, we could match the trainers, we could match, and also those people who are interested in doing intervention. So I think the model, I must say that since then, has been adopted by other groups, like MBI group and the surgeons and so forth. So I think in this way, I think we should be proud to say that we are now in the forefront of structured training programs in GI endoscopy. So I think KL clearly knows the vision. So there's something about him. He knows how to pick the correct thing to go for. And I think we actually have this achievement which surpassed what the Western people have been trying to do for the last 10 years. So the other thing is coming back to technology. And this is something I would say that many of us certainly have the potential to do good in technology. I'll come to the last part, the conclusion, why I believe so. Because we are Asians, okay? So we are actually in some ways disadvantaged either because of small size, resource, and so forth, and we cannot compete in some ways with the West. But in technology, we have advantage. And I heard a lot from Wakutan about, I think, technology. He reads a lot about technology. So I must say that also influenced in some ways to do academia because of that reason. We know about a lot of advances in endoscopy, from the camera putting in, and then to a lot of procedures and so forth. And the focus before was lumina. And clearly there's a space which we have not really truly explored. That's the transluminal space. And the transluminal space is important because I think surgeon has actually been dominating this space from outside for a long time, and endoscopy has not. So this way, I think for a lot of time, we wonder why we cannot actually do together with a surgeon. I think Sanji mentioned about the handshaking. We shake hands a lot with the surgeons, but we still could not actually truly integrate with the surgeons. And there's something actually has troubled a lot of us in the past. Why cannot we actually merge the two together? And we couldn't figure out. Then we realized that actually our paths were different. We came from different paths. The surgeons were actually the different creatures. Waikotan is the same one. He actually was dissuaded from doing surgery. So I think we actually went in through the endoscopy route. And we were not from the same origin. And then trying to put these two groups of people together was a real challenge. But more importantly, when we look at it, and then we couldn't figure out why surgeons were so calm in the OT and we were so stressed out in the endoscopy center. And we couldn't figure out why. And then suddenly we realized that, actually the culture was different. And the surgeons, most of them originated from the West. And they are beef and stick people. Okay? So they use two hands. No wonder So now we understand why they were different. Japanese were camera people, so they only know how to use their eyes. So they ended up only focusing on the eyes. So that was our problem. So no wonder we can never will be. If we continue the way the Japanese told us, you'll never be as good as the surgeons. So then the question becomes, okay, how do we then change this from one arm to something we are very good in, which is chopsticks? So we still have advantage because chopsticks is actually converting one arm to two arms. So that's a challenge. So at the time, I think, again, at the early 2000s, I wasn't reading a lot of technology books, but I was thinking about all these things. How do we actually, as a small country, I'm a Malaysian, but I work in Singapore like Wakatan. So how could we, as a small country, do as well as the West with no additional, I think, workload, technology, anything? Just plain using the mind, can we be as good as the surgeons? Can we be as good? So I think that's where the thing is, can we actually try to bridge it and then somehow put two arms inside? Because after all, as I mentioned before, diagnosis is using 5 senses. We only have managed to put 1 sense in. Doesn't make sense to me. And then operating, you cannot be putting 1 arm in. That doesn't also make sense to us. So how do we actually put 2 arms in? So the only way is to string yourself with all the computer way. Okay? So that was where we created this first endoscopy robot called the Master and Safe Transluminal Endoscopy Robot. So basically, it just involves miniaturizing yourself into really small and putting the whole thing, your arms, into the scope and deliver down into the patient's orifice. So this is a platform technology. So whenever you do something, and the so-called slave follows your commands. And then with that, we finally, I think after many years of animal work, we finally performed the world's first. You see, from Singapore, we actually managed to become world first in something, endoscopic robotic ESD. So that actually involves real patients with early gastric cancer, where we managed to actually do it in Hong Kong with the surgeons, the Hong Kong surgeons' help, and then we did this surgery live in a live demo. So I think we removed the tumor using these endoscopy robots, which are the 2 arms are actually delivered via the endoscope, with 1 arm lifting just like anything you do and in surgery, and the other arm just cutting it gradually. Okay, so the whole thing was eventually removed and so forth. What is actually the value of robots? Of course, many people, the so-called Japanese who are samurai, they can actually cut a lot of things from the whatever knives they use. But I think the real values of all these robots is essentially, I think, is to bridge, again, shorten the learning curve. Because I spoke about, we have disadvantages in many countries, small countries, because we don't have the caseload or this kind of training people have in the West. So that's where sometimes we have to shorten the learning curves and mimic as much real life as possible. Similar to all this iPad, almost zero learning curve required. So that's the kind of thing we should try to aspire to do in future. But secondly, more importantly, I always wonder why surgeons are so calm in the OT and we are so nervous when we do scope. Is because we never have figured out a way to deal with complication. We cannot salvage ourselves. We always ask the surgeon, please help me. So at the end of the day, we have to use 2 arms. That's the conclusion we have to finally accept. Okay? So that's where we hope eventually to use a robot and just do everything the surgeons do. God gives us 2 arms. So for goodness sake, just use the 2 arms. So that's where I think we started this journey, and since then, we're proud to say many people follow us. Some actually literally copy us. So we have from Belgium group, Endomina, from the West, all these different companies came up. They came out after us. But fortunately, we found the patterns in different areas now. All these are flexible endoscopy robot. And even the big boys, this is intuitive. Just recently, to say that They are doing what the word, can you see that? A secretive startup. Okay, clear for use, and Google and Johnson have been going into it, very similar to ours. Okay, our inspiration came from the Singapore chili crab. They are trying to mimic the Singapore's chili, not very successfully, too big. Okay, so I think again we say that with that we are hoping laparoscope has this thing, Notes in future has the so-called robotic endoscopy robot. And we are happy to say that I think in this way Asia has actually contributed to the advent of flexible robotic endoscopy. So I think further than that, that's the other thing I think about academia. Why I enjoy academia? Because we solve a lot of issues we cannot solve. So the other big thing that we always wonder, why is training so difficult in terms of making decisions? It's because we cannot, actually we cannot make diagnosis real time in terms of trying to get certain things like pathology and so forth on the spot. So the real time has become a big challenge, and this is something that we also have been trying to work on. And the solution is actually involving something which is optic lighting. Okay, I won't go into details about this thing. Suffice to say, this is a kind of laser technology which we came up with the help of the engineers, where the laser fires through a probe which can be inserted through the endoscope and deliver to the tissue concerned, and then it causes a scatter, which is then gathered by the same optic fibers, sent back to the spectrography, and then after that interpreted as signals. And what is actually more important is we managed to actually use this technology to do diagnosis real time. So it's very simple. You got this machine here, and then you do your usual endoscope. For those people who are not familiar with endoscope, we actually put it in and look at this and look at it and detect any lesions. But the usual challenge is sometimes we don't know what the thing is, and that's when we can actually insert this probe inside. And then there's a computer which comes out. So the moment your laser probe touches it, it sends a signal back, and then the computer will then pick up the signals here, over here, and then come up with the diagnosis straight away. So how it does that is it matches, again, the signal with the library of all the data you can accumulate anywhere. And the data the computer through AI, that's a cancer here, through the artificial intelligence can make the diagnosis real time. So essentially, and we have a control there. You just touch it, and then it's normal here. Okay. So I think we have been using it. I think more in terms of sometimes for margin marking. So for instance, myself here. So if you look at here, there's a probe. Then you can see the margin where the tumor is real time, and then it comes out high risk. So you know that there's a place you need to resect. Again, this is real time. Basically, employ a very simple thing. And this thing, I think, has a lot of potential because we know that Kodak is dead. And why it's dead is because it used a technology which doesn't make sense. Okay, you take a film, and then a few days later you have to develop, so you don't get the answer straight away. And this is exactly what we say that why Kodak actually, I think the entire enterprise was wiped out today because it didn't actually realize why it needed to do that. So because it forgot, ultimately, we want something which is called a picture, not a film. So it forgot. Coming back to how we do pathologies, I don't know whether there are any pathologies here, but again, we forget why we have pathology. We basically want a diagnosis. So that's where the technology Kodak was disrupted because they use something which is digital. The moment you take it, it can be sent across the whole world to everybody you can think of within half a second. Same as this thing, which is what I just showed you just now. Okay? So sometimes when we look at a limitation, we have to think about another solution. You cannot continue the same way because it's too slow, it's not practical. You have to think about totally different solution, which I think the future is optical solution, which has no physical limit. Finally, I think endoscopy, talking about progress and so forth, we are all very familiar. A capsule, great stuff, okay? And that's the future, believe me. Because if you ask any of our patients, nobody wants this variable stiffness scope to be put in. We all are used to eating, so we are comfortable with putting a capsule in. But the challenge why it's not taking off as well is we are going behind 30 years. Because endoscopy are most to treatment, and this guy has no treatment. So that's where a lot of us are working on therapeutic endoscopy. Okay, that's some work I do in my spare time with engineers in A-Star, trying to develop a therapeutic capsule, but it doesn't happen. Believe me, I think this project is a waste of money. We just did it because we wanted the government's money. That's why we say, oh, okay, we'll do it. So, secretly, we took the money, don't tell anybody. Okay, don't go back to Singapore to tell them what I did. So what we did instead in our spare time, while we are figuring out, while we are actually wasting the money here, is to do something else, which I must say KL is the one actually asked us to try to look into this issue of so-called obesity. It's a big problem, okay? So he is the one who actually asked us to form this group, to study this problem, which is coming. So far, I think if you think about that, a lot of things we are trying to do is to solve big issues, not small little things. Okay? So I think this one we haven't dealt with. Okay? I'll just show you one possible solution from this capsule. So this possible solution is called a weight loss capsule. Okay? As I mentioned before, we didn't actually do what A-Star asked us to do, the government asked us to do, but instead in our spare time we were working on something else because we were thinking about solving something else. And it's a capsule which you can swallow. And then when you use this thing, when you use a Manac, this capsule will start to inflate. Okay? It starts to blow up. Okay? Can you see that? The thing starts to blow up and then up and up and up. So when it fills up, you feel full and you don't eat anymore. Okay? That's a weight loss capsule. Then you turn it upside down. Okay? You turn it upside down. I'll show you later on. When you turn it upside down, the capsule will actually collapse. Okay? So this is already published. So I can share with you the trick. So the trick is to use acid and alkaline inside. And then you have acid alkaline. Then you have a valve through the Manac. And then the whole thing, you can actually get the acid and alkaline to mix. Okay? So what is those people who study science, what happens when the acid and alkaline mix together? Sorry? A chemical reaction. What's a chemical reaction? Acid and alkaline. Sorry? We don't have scientists here. Hey, Sanjeev, what happened to all the Department of Medicine? CO2. So CO2 is a gas we use for insufflation in laparoscope as well as in endoscope. So anyway, so we use the acid alkaline, which is actually just, the acid is actually acetic acid, vinegar, and the alkaline is baking soda. So it just makes the two together. The Manac actually separate. So there are two chambers. The Manac force a pin to break the membrane, and then the two mix, and the other one has a valve which leaks the CO2. So the basic is we did an experiment and it worked. So and then there's an explanter on a porcine stomach. This is a balloon which blown up after we put it in, and then after that we can actually take it out. Okay. So I think the trick is, this is something we're still working on. It's work in progress. The trick is you swallow something, then you blow up the first balloon from outside using the Manac. And how do we know that the balloon is there? Because the infrared tells you that it's inside. First balloon, the first day. A few days later, second balloon goes in. And the third day later, maybe another balloon in. And then finally, you stop eating. So when you want to start eating again, you just one by one release the balloon. Okay? So that's a way to actually lose a bit of weight. Not a lot, but it's good for the females here who wants to lose some kilos before their wedding. So I think essentially what I basically like to say is that I think you know the days when actually the old times when horses, okay? So we are going through the stage now about an endoscopy. And a lot of things have happened. I think the time when, I think 1990s, when KL Goh first started, and now things have happened, speeding away. And in fact, we are going through another revolution now. Okay, the IT revolution is gone. I don't think you can actually advance further. People are moving into the body now. If you speak to a lot of people outside, they're all saying that they're betting on biomedical now because we have solved a lot of things in the external, but we haven't solved as many things inside our body. That's why all these next generation sequencer, they are trying to match the power of computer by sequencing faster and faster. So again, same thing. I think when we want to actually go about trying to solve things, we cannot use the same thing as horses. You know that the horses were destroyed suddenly by the cars, and once the cars were there, ships came, trains came, planes came at the same time. They all follow the same order. So the next one is IT, then all everything follow. The next one will be, unfortunately, will be robots, and they all follow the same thing. Driverless first came, something else will come later on. It's a whole range of train of technologies will follow the first sign. And that's where I encourage the young people to actually think about that. Okay, I always think about this thing. I say that no matter how far I can run, Singapore is small. That's all the talents you have. And then you can only run 8 seconds at most, 100 meters. That's the limit of humans. But if you use something else, which is called machines, you can run as fast as you like because you use the machines to take over. So machines don't have a limit. And the same with minds. Minds do not have a limit. It can be here, it can be there, it can be everywhere. So I think to this, I must say, KL Goh typifies one of those people who had a lot of mind. So that's where at the beginning I say that his mind is actually, the play field is not just confined to University of Malaya, it's actually the whole Asia Pacific. And that's a mind we are talking about. A mind which actually goes beyond, because our mind has no limit where you can go to. So I think the younger people here, I think we have to start to think what the minds can do. And that's actually quoting from Hawkins, who actually managed to fly to Harvard, and yet talking when the whole body is paralyzed. Physically, he's not able to do anything, but his mind can actually let him travel anywhere in the world. So I think I just want to finish here to say that my hometown, Taiping, that's actually a picture taken there, the Lake Garden in Taiping. Okay, so why do I show you this picture? Here's Taiping. Sorry? Oh, retirement down for KL Goh. No. Okay, basically, I just want to finish to say that I think a lot of us are very fortunate today because of what KL Goh has done. And that's actually say that, I think that's a Chinese proverb to say that one generation plants the trees, another one gets the shade. It takes years to actually grow to this sort of size for all the trees. So with that, I salute KL Goh for all the contribution it's made to GI endoscopy in the region. Thank you.
We are keeping up with time. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is from Philippines. When he came in, before we start the function, I asked him, what do you want me to talk about you? Is there anything that you want me to omit? Like, for example, your age? He said only one thing. Just tell them I'm a childhood friend of Professor KL Goh. What does he mean by childhood friend? They grow up together in gastroenterology. They were a child, they were adolescent, they were adult, the men, now they are the grandfather of gastroenterology. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to introduce to you all Professor Jose Solano. Professor Jose Solano is a famous gastroenterologist from Philippines. is currently the chair and the senior consultant in gastroenterology in the Santo Thomas University in Manila. He was the past president of Philippine Society of Gastroenterology. He's a senior therapeutic endoscopist, and he has published numerous publications in field of endoscopy and liver disease. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Uze Solano will be talking about the changing epidemiology of GI and liver diseases in the Asia-Pacific region. Please welcome. Which one is yours? You didn't put it in?
I put it in a bit. Here, maybe.
This one? Solano.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Dean,
Can I
the Vice Chancellor, Sanjeev. Thank you very much for this invitation, and of course to my co-speakers and to Professor KL Goh and his family. When I was asked by Sanjeev to give this talk, I thought that maybe I'll talk about things that you don't know about KL Goh. Because clearly this is his day, this is his birthday, this is also the time to roast him. But unfortunately, Sanjeev had an agenda. He said to me, just talk about the epidemiology of GI diseases and liver disease in Asia. Because clearly, when you talk about KL Goh's writings, they basically extend from the mouth to the anus. And that is why gastroenterology is very important. See, the microbiome is bigger than anything else. And so we see gold in the gut. Unfortunately, KL Goh did not. So this talk will be looking at the epidemiology of GI diseases, a journey with Professor KL Goh and his writings. I sort of worked with KL for the first time academically by doing some consensus. And the first consensus that we did was on dyspepsia, and at that time, Nick Talley and Richard Hunt were the organizers. And you know, if you have worked with these people, the pre-meetings, which happens 2 days before the actual meet, is more rigorous than the consensus building. And so that sort of made us very, very close. And however, we met maybe a year or two before that, basically because of our love for, at that time, therapeutic endoscopy. We went to the same center. He additionally went to Amsterdam as well and did a lot of ERCPs. I trained in the liver in Japan, and I thought that I was a hepatologist in the beginning. But then when I returned to the Philippines, where hepatitis B and tuberculosis of the liver were so rampant, we cannot do anything in the hepatitis world. We were treating hepatitis B in Chiba University with ganciclovir and all the other antivirals, and we never had successes. And we even used foscarnet in some of those experiments, and we realized later on that they were poison. So I did therapeutic endoscopy and therefore became a gastroenterologist in the beginning, and so I worked with KL. And if you look at the writings of KL over the years, he has spoken about dyspepsia, and clearly the data that he has gathered and generated from Malaysia and some of his collaborations with the other gastroenterologists in the Asia Pacific has basically collected and put together the database of what is perhaps the epidemiology and the publications that support this data today on dyspepsia, for example. Here is the prevalence of both uninvestigated and functional dyspepsia in Asia. And you can see that while KL was the first one to tell you that there is a difference between the ethnic groups that that lives in Malaysia, and of course H. pylori, this concept is also the same and similarly appreciated in the other parts of Asia Pacific. For example, Korea, where H. pylori is very, very prevalent, and yet functional dyspepsia is a small percentage compared to the Chinese, for example, or the Malays or the Indians in Malaysia. Gastroesophageal reflux disease is one disease area where KL really made a killing. He had published maybe about 100 papers on reflux disease. And I tell you that he was the first one, of course, in addition to the people in Hong Kong, who made a lot of work on reflux disease. He has described to us how the Southeast Asians perhaps behaved compared to the Brits, to the complaints of heartburn, for example, and the lament that we cannot describe heartburn in Asia very well because we don't have a vernacular word for that. And of course, easily and early on, this has described obesity as a risk factor in the causation of reflux, and of course later on even in the liver. I saw this slide from the internet, and it seems that Malaysia is the capital of the world. I don't know how it is, but I thought that the Filipinos eat a lot. Is this genetics? But clearly, we need a lot of work with Lawrence here doing his capsule endoscopy and balloons, and maybe even some surgical endoscopic procedures to make sure that the obese individuals in our midst are able to control their BMIs so that they live longer and happier. Here is, for example, a publication by KL on the perspective of GI, of GERD in the Southeast Asian region. And clearly, what you see is a doubling of the prevalence of either erosive esophagitis or reflux disease, depending on which studies that have been published. And this is, of course, clearly because of our diet, because of our obesity, and maybe perhaps many other issues that are not yet described in Southeast Asia. And therefore, for the young members of this crowd here, I've always said that aside maybe from robotics, motility is still one area where you can still be very famous. And of course, KL has been in the forefront of many consensus statements in the Asia-Pacific region, published in very respected journals in the world, and collaborating with the biggest names in this field in the Asia-Pacific region, in North America, and of course in Europe. The H. pylori story of KL is, of course, also an outstanding story. In fact, because of these ethnic groupings in Malaysia, he was able to describe to us that even if you are living in the same community, if you are exposed to different environmental factors, then clearly disease outcomes are different. And Richard Hunt had always been very vocal about the KL Goh enigma, he calls it, where you cannot really seem to explain why an Indian does not behave like the Malay or the Chinese in a very, very contained community like Malaysia, even if they are exposed to the same pathogen. And so KL has brought to the front, for the fore, the idea that indeed, if you look at very closely these subpopulations, you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about their pathology. You can learn a lot about how we treat them. And most importantly is you're able to publish a lot. He has done so much work in Helicobacter pylori, for example, has worked with the biggest names and the brightest luminaries in H. pylori in the world, and clearly has done a lot of publications in all these fields that are related to H. pylori. Peptic ulcer, for example, is diminishing and increasing reflux esophagitis prevalence in this part of the world, and of course, the diminution of gastric cancer and the increase of esophageal cancers. I am very impressed by this paper by KL because as a clinician and as a researcher, he has brought to the fore again the emphasis of public health in all the things that we do. He is not with government, clearly, but all of these publications can be used by technocrats in order to craft certain policies so that they can affect the entire nation. By educating our physicians in the field and by teaching them how to treat Helicobacter pylori, for example, we can see that in Asia today, there's a decreasing trend in gastric cancer. Is this because of less exposure to certain nitrosamines that are as part of the diet, which I don't think so. But clearly maybe this is part of the campaign on how to detect H. pylori and how to treat them properly. We have one paper that we just published from my center, for example, that there is a significant association between the diminishing prevalence of H. pylori in our center and the detection of gastric cancer in the same unit. And so our success in H. pylori education as well as in eradication may have led to better public health implications. He has also published a lot on the treatments. And I think if you look at how many papers and how many treatment strategies KL has published, you'll be astounded. Once in a while, I drive home to my house, and I always wondered, I thought that H. pylori is diminishing in prevalence in Asia. Where does KL get all his H. pylori patients, you know? He has 100 patients in one paper, and I cannot understand how he is able to harness the forces in this building, for example, in this campus, to bring all the H. pylori patients so that they get tested, biopsied, cultured, and then treated. That just drives the fact that he is a good team leader and that he's able to inspire his people to do better, to do work, to do more work. You'll be able to finish a study population of about 100. And here, for example, is the antibiotic resistance patterns of the 4 most commonly used antibiotics for H. pylori eradication. And we are also worried about the resistance rates of the indiscriminate use of antibiotics in the H. pylori population of our stomachs. And very interesting that at least in Malaysia, only metronidazole has a problem and all the rest of these antibiotics are not. And he has given us and proven to us many rescue therapies that we can use in case we fail in the first trial that we do. And again, thanks to KL and his persistence, we are able to get some additional armamentarium in the treatment of H. pylori. Upper GI bleeding is, of course, a smaller problem these days. It is small in quantity, but more serious in the patients that we see because the upper GI bleeders in our midst are the elderly. They're brittle. Their mortality rates have not really gone down despite all the techniques that we have done. And here, for example, listed in this slide are some of the risk factors that are related to a higher mortality. Most of these emanates from the trials and the studies that have been done in Hong Kong, as well as, of course, from Malaysia. And here is the Asia-Pacific consensus of non-variceal upper GI bleeding, which is very meaningful to me because in the pre-consensus development meeting that we had, we did it in Kuala Lumpur. And at that time, there was a demonstration. And so they had to use the overhead train because they cannot pass through the streets. And when we did the consensus development conference, it was held in Bangkok. And again, during that time, they were all demonstrating, and there were soldiers from the airport to the hotel. So this is a very, very stressful consensus meeting, enough to give you an upper GI bleed. And of course, down the gut, you see that KL has been publishing with the help of Ida and all his other colleagues here in the entire Malaysian peninsula. They're able to collect data so that we can describe better, say, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Here, for example, this data tells us that there's really no difference between what is the clinical behavior of UC in Asia, for example, compared to the West, except that, again, in an ethnic comparison, it seems that the Indians have more extraintestinal manifestations and more extensive disease. Here is Crohn's disease, working with Dr. Wee, who is actually from Penang. I realized that in Singapore, if you are a Malaysian national, it's easier to get a job. So you should put Ida to some chain in this chair here, because I know that the Singapore population is still needing expansion, so they have more room for Malaysians to work there. So IBD is one very close subject to my heart, because while I do liver and endoscopy, I'm the only crazy guy who's also doing IBD in the Philippines. And so in one meeting, in one morning in New Orleans in 2010, we sort of talked about IBD in the world. And there, in the leadership of Richard Kosarek, now there is a stronger IBD committee that is being run by the APAGE. And of course, there are also some additional organizations that run the Crohn's and colitis conferences in this part of the world. And so we are getting more data and are getting to understand IBD. Colorectal cancer is increasing. It is one of the fastest cancers that happen today in Asia. In the Philippines, for example, it used to be number 5 10 years ago. Now it's number 3 as a killer cancer among men. And that is not different from all the other parts of Asia. And here, KL has also been doing a lot of work. We have done work together in some scoring system that Kay Guan Yo first initiated in Singapore. And of course, the 2 consensus statements that were published has always had KL Goh in the forefront. Lastly, of course, is obesity. It is very nice that we are able to have money in our pocket. And the deeper the pocket, the better for the kids. But here, it's an alarming situation, because in Malaysia, for example, maybe the genetics plays a little bit more into the obesity problem here, but clearly, of course, affluence. Now, KL has done with Sanjeev here a lot of work on NASH and NAFLD. And in fact, in the World Gastroenterology Organization global guidelines, KL Goh was also very much in the midst of that participation. Now, he has also published in pancreatic cancer. Why is he going to the retroperitoneum? It's because he is an expert endoscopist. Here, for example, is a picture of one workshop that I did in 1997, long time ago. Look at KL Goh. He looks very young. Maybe that's why Sulin really liked him. You know? And he was with his teacher and our teachers. And I suspect that I was the one who was taking the picture because I wasn't included here. But this is our first attempt to do an endoscopic workshop in the Philippines. And we continue this, but I think KL has continued his workshops for a much, much longer time. This is very memorable because the next year we were invited to the Hong Kong endoscopy workshop. And if I can remember right, we were the first 2 Southeast Asian therapeutic endoscopists ever invited into that very, very prestigious workshop. And so KL and myself had been together for quite a long time. I had known him at daytime and I also know him at nighttime. And as always, as you are a good student, and if you really are a good student, you also become a very good teacher. And I am very, very interested in reading this article by KL because he described the same experience that I had in Manila, transforming a fledgling unit into something that is churning very good endoscopists for the nation. These are familiar faces. Some of them are here. Some are beautiful. Some are handsome. But I think what is most important is that the work of KL in the unit has earned him the appreciation of the world body of endoscopy. In fact, one of the only few centers of excellence has been awarded to this center of endoscopy. And I am very thankful for him because he has also accepted some of our young fellows from the Philippines. We run an ERCP program in my center, but we are the only center that is doing ERCP. We can only have 1 or 2 trainees every 6 months. And so very, very deep appreciation to the efforts that you have extended to them, KL. But I think what is most important to KL is his character. In 2013, the Asia hosted the World Congress. It was combined with the APAGE or the APDW in Shanghai. And he asked me to give a recommendation to one luminary in Asia so that he becomes a candidate for an award, one of the most prestigious awards for the World Congress. And I thought to myself, I said, maybe he should have done this to himself because he was also a great man. But see, such a gentleman is able to give back to others, to put the accolade to others, and they're very comfortable with it. As the saying goes, the differences are many between a gentleman and a man, but in all, it all comes down to this, that a man takes the necessary amount of steps, a gentleman takes the extra step in doing good to make it better. And KL is always an idol. You can never hear him say bad words to anybody, even if you have so many competing personalities in this all-boys club in Asia, because he has always maintained a decorum, a dignity that is impeccable. And in that aspect, I really, really appreciate that he is a friend of mine. Sanjeev has spoken about leadership, spoken about teaching, and as always, we are all teachers, and I would like to appeal to all of you here who are below the dean's position, that we are all teachers. We must teach because that is part of our Hippocratic oath, but that is the best way to be able to be a happy person. I always tell my trainees that go back to the province, especially to my province, that there are so many reasons why you want to teach and want to train young doctors to be as good as you, if not better than you, because that is the crown that one teacher would like to wear. And I always joke that there's also a selfish reason to that. I said, if my relatives need a good doctor, then they can have some doctor in the province who can take care of them. That will not kill them. So here, for example, in this center, of course, in Southeast Asia, you have a man who is able to build character, who inspires dreams, who encourages creativity, builds confidence, makes learning fun, touches your heart and your soul, and changes your life, so that you will be better than him. You have seen some personalities here. He's good looking, right? Soon he will have white hair. And so we can also roast him. Now, KL, you're going home and getting a retirement. And people will miss you, clearly. But then sometimes we say, and we heard this already, that retirement is when work stops and life begins. Maybe for you, but not for Sulin. Soon you will be texting her every hour. Says, where are you? What are you eating? Who are you speaking to? You know, so very little dangerous. But sometimes, even if you sit in this chair here or in this bench and look at nature, retirement can stare you like a blank space. Because clearly retirement is like when you were 18. You can figure out whether you are an adult or still a child. And clearly, of course, as you go a little bit way beyond today, we know that there are physical, mental, and emotional deductions that happen because of the wear and tear. So I must remind you that please look at your schedule. Shower every day. And look at the last line. Do that every day, please. May I recommend to you to buy this book, The Joy of Not Working? Because my friend here is very, very happy to be a pensioner and also earning at the same time. What a way to go. Now, this book, look at the title, because you cannot read this book, because you cannot be very happy, or too wild, because you're really not free. See, you still have kids around you, you still have trainees around you, and even if you were the most impeccable boss at the height of your career, remember that today or tomorrow, when you have retired, you switch bosses. Sulin, I leave you this slide. Now, of course, with retirement comes wisdom. With age comes wisdom. But wisdom sometimes can be annoying, especially to a young boy. See? I just came back from Tokyo the other day, and when I met my kids for dinner, they were telling me how I react on very simple stresses. And sometimes you tell them, okay, these are wise words from an old man. Because wisdom actually is really nice. But problem is, when you are 70 or so, you tend to repeat those words of wisdom 10 times every 10 seconds. So you will be afraid, I'm so afraid that one day your neighbors will put this and hang this in your fence. You know? So we heard today that KL is retiring. And all his staff who likes him are sad. But those who don't like him maybe are happy. They would like to see his back go into the sunset. But I tell you, this guy is not going away. This guy is not going away. Look at the spelling of retire. These are like those F1 drivers in Sepang. See? You just retire. Change tires to run again. See? And because he is such a class act, he is such a leader, he's going to make sure that everyone who has followed him maintains the same quality of training, the same passion, and the same commitment to excellence. And I am very sure about that because I know him very well. So to this man today, a good friend of mine, I have grown old with him. You can see our manes, they're all gray. He's very charming. I am sure he's an alpha male, I tell you. And in those white hair is wisdom. But I bet that the most important quality that this person has is his humility, his dignity, his sense of fairness, and his commitment to his craft. He is the gentleman's gentleman. So, you are such a class act, KL, difficult to follow. So, Sanjeev, you have very big shoes to fill. So I'll leave you with this last slide, because it looks like that your day and schedule will be looking like this. Waking up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and that will be a nightmare to Sulin. But I must tell you that, amigo Riz, enjoy these days, the next several years, because now you can laze around and sip on your coffee. You can even strut around the house in your jammies and tea. It is now that you will enjoy time ticking by slowly. To retire to such a life, you are really lucky. Congratulations, KL. God bless you and your family. Godspeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the last lecture. Of course, we have saved the best for the last. Ladies and gentlemen, my speaker, the next speaker, is the man of the occasion. A lot of things I've seen about Professor Goh. All of you know a lot of things about Professor Goh. He's a great doctor, clinician, researcher. You won't let me talk. You'll come and do this all the time. Yeah. Professor Sanjeev has mentioned that he has trained many doctors in the country, gastroenterologists in private and Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education. But one more thing that I would like to add on is that no one else has mentioned is that he has trained chain of doctors from abroad, from Philippines especially. In my 5 years here, I have seen many doctors from Philippines coming for advanced therapeutic training. It's been 5 years I work with him, and it's like a blink of an eye. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to proudly present Professor KL Goh to present his last lecture in University of Malaya in the blink of my eye. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Here I am now, 36 years. If you count my years as a student, it's actually 41 years. 41 years. And it's a lifetime, but it seems like it was only yesterday that I entered the portals of this great university. So there we are. Right. Vice Chancellor Awang Mugiba, Dean Adiba, Sanjeev, my dearest friends, Vaikuntan, Lawrence, and Joey, thank you. Thank you for coming into this very special occasion. Special thanks, of course, to Sanjeev, who has worked tirelessly and gone around catching all of you to attend this very, very special meeting so that I will not be embarrassed. But anyway, here I am. And also another thing that I told him was, he told me at first, I'll give you 45 minutes. I bargained. I said, 30 minutes is enough. But I also did warn him that don't get me started, because if you get me started and my family will know, I don't stop. I ramble on, and I don't know what you're going to do to say, please stop, please stop. So nevertheless, here it is, in a blink of an eye, 36 years at the University of Malaya. So let me just run through very briefly about myself and the early years, and a little bit about myself. Right, I'm a Penang person. Both my parents, I was born in Penang, both my parents are Penang, and we moved to Ipoh and then Kuala Lumpur because my dear father was a government servant all his life. He retired a government servant. And my wife, my dearest wife, Sulin, by coincidence, not by design, is also a Penang person. But I would say that I know more about Penang than she does, although I've I've left Penang many more years than she has. Those who are close and near to me know that history and geography are my favorite subjects. Not the sciences, and definitely not mathematics. And you can see some of the books that I read here, my bedtime story books, almost all of them about Penang, of course, and some are actually quite academic tracks. And these were provided to me by this lady here, Professor Loh Wai Ling, Professor Bersara, or retired, History, University of Malaya. But Wai Ling has a more famous half, and I don't know how many of you can recognize Mr. Tanek Huang. Mr. Tanek Huang, yeah. We all know about Lee Chong Wei and maybe Ms. Bunside, but Tanek Huang was the great man in the 1960s. Champion, singles champion from Penang, also both of them from Penang, champion for many, many years, which culminated in him winning the All England men's singles title in 1966. My alma mater was all Catholic brother schools, simply because my mother was a teacher, and she started off teaching in St. Xavier's Institution, Penang, and then she continued in the Catholic brother school system. So obviously all her children also went to the Christian brother school. So I studied in St. Michael's, Ipoh, La Salle Brickfields, and then St. John's Institution, Kuala Lumpur. A great institution, as you can see. I don't have many old pictures, but I picked up this picture from the school magazine, and the school has illustrious alumni, our most admired Chancellor, Sultan Nasrin, and then you also have comedians, and I guess I have to stop now and not go on with the list. It's a long list, but I better stop now. Yeah. Right. Entering medical school, 1975, University of Malaya. It was the greatest achievement and pride. Only the best HSC Form 6 students entered University of Malaya, and it was for engineering as well as for medicine. And those who did not do so well, maybe an A or two less, would go to University of Singapore. And only accountancy students go to UK. So we were a very traditional British type of medical school, if I may say. And there was some measure of elitism. In fact, there was a great measure of elitism. And I think that made us proud. And that perhaps at that period of time, it made the medical school quite great, if I may say. Right, this is a picture of how the Faculty of Medicine University Hospital looked like when we entered. Of course, this was earlier than the time we entered, but basically that was it. Right, the Faculty of Medicine and the University Hospital, no extra buildings. But many years later, of course, newer buildings were added, and this picture was taken later, and we had the primary care building added to the complex. But at that time, the name was still University Hospital. And to all of us, and perhaps Vaikuntan as well, we are very associated to the name University Hospital. But in 2000, due to a change in the statutes of the University Act, University Hospital became University of Malaya Medical Centre. So some timelines, I was medical student 5 years, then immediately we trained as houseman and medical officer to get our postgraduate degrees, and since getting the MRCP in 1984, became academic staff, associate professor in 1991, and professor from January 1998 to the present time. In between, I was for a time head of medicine, 1998 to 2004, 3 terms of 6 years. And you can see this to the right, is to the left, rather, on your side. That is a picture of the heads of department that are hung up in the conference room or hall of the Department of Medicine. And I take pride because this conference hall, maybe my most significant action as the head was created by myself. Look at the nice wood paneling, because I had to ask the Vice Chancellor at the time to provide $50,000 extra to give the wood paneling. But you can see the list of heads of department, starting from T.J. Daraj, H.O. Wong, etc., etc. And on the right, this is a picture only taken yesterday with the staff, the clerical staff of the Department of Medicine, chief among which is Puan Rohana, who has been a faithful, long-serving servant of the Department of Medicine. Rohana, she was a clerk when I was head of department, but soon she became the steno or secretary of the Department of Medicine. When we came, we held everything in the Faculty of Medicine, the university, in awe. Not least because of one man, small in size, but a giant in personality, that is T.J. Dhanaraj. But at that time, he was retiring, about to retire, and we had the acting dean then, if I couldn't remember, Professor Lau Kam Singh, from pathology. We call him the silencer because he spoke in such soft tones that we could hardly hear what he was saying. And don't remember very much about him, but we had quite formidable other personalities, not least Professor Winnie Dhanaraj or Mrs. Dhanaraj. Little did we know at that time she was suffering from terminal cancer of the breast. But Winnie came and talked to the first year class, and it was like admonishing us in some ways. Dress properly with ties, etc. Don't play with your pimples in the hospital, etc., etc. We also had a Eurasian lady, Mrs. Woodhull. She was our librarian, and that was a big job at the time. That was a high job. Librarian was very important, and she spent an hour extolling the virtues of the beloved library. And this is the library, and it's changed a little bit with this lecture hall. And I know she ended up that 1 hour or so asking us, who is your favorite author? Everybody kept quiet. Nobody could say anything. So I thought I'd put up my hand and I said George Bernard Shaw. But promptly she said, I don't agree with you. It's not George Bernard Shaw. And she gave reasons why it should not be George Bernard Shaw. And I can't remember the reason. The days and years in medical school were relatively halcyon days. Exams were there. They were a damn nuisance, of course. But the toughest exam was the fourth-year semi-final examination. Because if we failed exam, we had to stay back 1 year. And we got to go and join our juniors. Can you imagine that? But seriously, honestly, we never thought we could fail. In between, I was president of Medical Student Society, 77-78, what they call MedSoc. And also, I was quite a busybody or kepo, and I joined the University of Malaya Students Union, organizing in Pestaria in 1977. The University of Malaya Students Union, or AMSU, was a really powerful organization at the time. You all cannot imagine it. Those of you who graduated from here or present students, you cannot imagine that. AMSU owned the whole of Bhakti Siswa. AMSU owned the whole fleet of buses. It belonged to AMSU. It did not belong to the University of Malaya. And they also made sure that there was a speaker's corner, like Hyde Park Corner, just outside the library, where the students, mainly the students, could say anything, especially about the Vice-Chancellor of the day. So we had a whole list of quite illustrious teachers. T.J. Dhanaraj, as I mentioned, is a very special man. A little bit more about him later. H.O. Wong was a teacher par excellence. A serious lady, but with a kind heart. She spoke with a clarity of mind. H.O. Wong became Mrs. Dhanaraj later on, after Winnie Dhanaraj had passed away. There was K. Somasundram, great surgeon. And we went through his lectures, but I think Vaikuntan will remember that we couldn't quite understand why, when he was giving lectures, he was talking down onto the table all the time. But Somasundram was a great surgeon, a real gentleman, and a very nice man. But perhaps the star of the whole cast here, by the way, all of them, except for Somasundram, were all alumni from the University of Singapore, was perhaps the outstanding personality here was T.A. Sinadure. T.A. Sinadure, in his unabashed style, would always claim, or he will tell all of us students or anybody else would hear, that he's the best ONG professor. in Malaysia as well as across the causeway. In fact, he did tell us once that he's the best professor in any field in medicine in this faculty of medicine. So Sinadure was a very interesting person, and he would not hesitate also to cast aspersions on fellow professors and associate professors, especially Associate Professor Wong Wai Ping, Vaikuntan, you remember? Yeah, he would cast aspersions on how they come late to work and their knowledge is lacking, and etc. etc. So he was a most interesting man. And for medicine, of course, I ended up in the medicine. There was T.G. Loh and Florence Wang. A little bit about them later. Graduation was a great time. My parents were the proudest parents. First doctor in the family. The convocation ceremony, however, was dominated by the convocation of one person. Sudirman Haji Arshad, Biduan Negara, Sudirman Haji Arshad. And when he came up to receive his scroll, there was rapturous applause. People couldn't stop clapping. And then I had a friend, anyway, he's the person who sits next to me perennially, Goh Dewe, Dr. Goh Dewe. And Dr. Goh Dewe is an incorrigible grumpy pot. And he made a comment, third class honors, or maybe not honors, honors, squeaked through the exam, never studied, and everybody is clapping. Look at you and me, we MBBS, doctor. And the only clapping came from our parents. So the early years of training, frequent calls, Cinderella system. Ward 12A was Florence Wang, Ward 4A was T.G. Loh, male and female ward. It fits, female ward, female professor, and male ward was male professor. Professor Wang's top house officer, I don't want to dispute the fact, was a certain Dr. R.V. Dr. Vaikuntan to be exact. And if his memory fails him, let me tell you why he was the top houseman. Because Professor Wang, goodness, her ward rounds minimum lasts 4 hours. If there was some interruption, it would go on for 2 days. And for every patient we saw, she demanded blood films. Remember, Vaikuntan? She demanded blood films. And there was only one houseman that could continuously provide blood films for patients. And it was Dr. Vaikuntan. No more chromic, no more cytic anemia from the left pocket, and hypochromic microcytic anemia from the right pocket. And I think without question, at the end of his 3-month stint, Professor Florence Wang spoke very warmly of this houseman. But sadly, he did not choose medicine. So we had ward rounds, we had clinics, and we had a few other extra stuff to do. We had good seniors. Kanan Pasamanikam, to this day, a very good friend. A really good man, sincere, and a really good boy. And even up to this day, he's saying, what will Danaraj say? I should not have gone to private practice. So, Vaikuntan, I told Kanan, please shut up and just earn more money, please, in Subang Jaya Medical Centre. We had another very interesting senior, C.C. Ho, from VI, Victoria Institution, no less. And C.C. Ho was the brightest guy. And he passed all his exams in double quick time. And before we knew it, he was our lecturer. And the most famous words that he told us during ward rounds was, look here, KL, the best time to solve any medical problem is after the ward rounds in the tea room. So you can imagine we had very short or brief ward rounds, and we spent more time drinking tea, talking about patients. So the professors and heads of medicine during my time training was T.G. Loh and Florence Wang. T.G. Loh they were formidable personalities, but T.G. Loh always had a wing in his eye. When he looked fierce, as you can see, he looked fierce, but he always had a wing of an eye. And in fact, he indeed is a very, very nice man. Florence Wang, till today, she still comes around, and mainly to see us and get prescription for medicine. But she was indeed a formidable person. You could say that she was a legend in its own time. But in between, we had fun too. We played badminton behind the faculty library most Saturday afternoons. And I think the badminton court is exactly somewhere here. It's all now disappeared. There was a court in the old library, and we put up the net. And my partner was Dr. Amit Mukherjee. These are not our photos then, but Amit Mukherjee was quite a bit smaller. Some of you may remember him. And he was the only Bengali who has a Tamil name. We call him Muthu. So me and Amit used to fetch each other from home, and we used to play badminton. Now and then we had an interloper, and who will come and give us some special tips in playing badminton, and that was Vaikuntan. Yeah. It was then very interesting to note that so many years later, on a Saturday afternoon, in a small village hospital in Singapore, that I bumped into Vaikuntan again. And I asked him, "What are you doing here?" I was giving the Xia Cheng Xiang eponymous lecture, so of course I was all dressed up and looking dapper and all that. And I saw this hardworking guy. I'm giving an extra tutorial to my fellows in hand and micro surgery. So training postgraduate, we usually in the Department of Medicine, usually, not all, we pass our MRCP Part 1 and Part 2 in double quick time. We became we passed out so fast, but we were still very much a general medical specialist, a physician. Right, MRCP training, it turns out that Professor Danaraj played a big part in my training, and at that time, he had gone to Saudi Arabia, established the King Saud University Hospital together with Professor Wong, and had come back to Malaysia. So he was quite free, and we were wanting to practice and learn medicine, so to speak. And Professor Danaraj, we contacted him, and he took us every Sunday for weeks on end. And the people who went constantly to his rounds were Kanan and Dr. Lee Moon Kin and myself. Faithfully, we were there. He would drive his white Daihatsu Charade and come down, and he would teach us from 9 to 12:30 every Sunday. And so this picture was taken several years later in my house, and was very nice. We did go out with Professor Wong and Professor Danaraj many times, including one time to a holiday bungalow in the Fraser's Hill as well. And the others in the picture, Kanan, as you all can recognize, is there. And my very good friend, Peter Anderson, and Mrs. Anderson. Peter Anderson was a surgeon and worked with me very closely in the early years in GI endoscopy. But gastroenterology as a subspecialty was indeed very fledgling. We were always told, no less by Professor Florence Wang, you are first a physician, then a gastroenterologist. So we did not even mention the word gastroenterologist in her presence. Gastroenterology was practiced less than 30% of the time. The gastro clinic was combined rheumatology, excluding SLE, on a Thursday afternoon. Both were considered very minor disciplines. Saturday morning was only to receive hepatitis B screen blood donors. But even at that time, we realized the crucial role of GI endoscopy in the development of gastroenterology. But it was, when it started, a surgical minor OT procedure. And this is where we did endoscopes in the first instance, 2 to 3 lists a week, maybe 4 to 5 patients per list. But it was a combined units of some sorts. The surgeons then was Dr. John G. Stephens, and then we had, for several years, Dr. H.B. Lee, and then amongst the physicians, we had Damien Wong and myself. Damien Wong is a special guy. My senior in medicine and gastroenterology, and a good friend of Vaikuntan, a self-effacing and careful man. Lecturer, became associate professor, but as soon as he got married, he was an old bachelor, but as soon as he got married, as a very responsible man and husband, he left for private practice immediately in 1996. But seriously, Damien was a good guy. And he taught me one thing, humility. He taught me, and he would always say, if we think we are doing well, or we can do procedures well, there are others who can do it even better. And he even extends it more latterly to our children. He said, if you think our children are doing well, if I think my son is doing well, other people's children are doing even better. They go to Oxford and Cambridge. But for the record, this week, Dr. Damien Wong Jr. is convocating in Trinity College, Dublin, a very prestigious university. Not only that, with first-class honors and distinction in surgery. And I'm told that he's going to go to Singapore to work as well. So we started out in academia, so to speak, and we were told publish or perish, both by T.G. Low and Florence Wang. As I say, T.G. Low would do it with a wink of an eye because he said, publish a little bit, maybe go to private practice is better. Yeah, Florence Wang, of course, was very pure, and she would keep on coming on our backs. So we started with case reports, for me at least, and then case series. And these are the lists of my early papers. And I look back, you get this printed out and you keep it and never look at it. I look back at the papers and, my God, they look quite interesting, these papers. Leukostasis, chylothorax, etc., etc. But one of the early papers was this paper, a report in the Medical Journal Malaysia on the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, a report of the first case in Malaysia. Thinking that I made the first report, people after me, including Professor Adiba, who is the HIV expert, would often quote this paper. I'm quite disappointed to note that nobody quotes the paper. Yeah. It soon became clear, as I continued working, that clinical research is always part of good clinical practice. You don't publish for the sake of publishing, because that's not sustainable, but because you have a story to tell. And honestly, there's always a story to tell. The discovery of H. pylori was a big discovery in the whole field of medicine. Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, with their letters to the Lancet in 1983. It was also, for me, a big discovery. And we started very quickly working on that because we could take biopsy samples from gastroscopy and we send them to pathologists. So our first presentation was in Genting Highlands, a presentation of Malaysian Society of Pathology. 1987, we presented Malaysia Singapore Congress, and our first paper came out in 1990 when the bacteria was still known as Campylobacter. So it took us several years. In those days, things move a bit slow. So 3 years to publish a paper, no big deal, it's still all right. Yeah. But things change when me and my family went to Amsterdam on sabbatical in 1991. When I arrived in Amsterdam, it was freezing cold, minus 17 or something like that. It was ice in all the canals. You can see it there. And but the Amsterdam people were thrilled. They were obviously happy because it was a white winter. They had ice. They could go skating, as you can see in this picture here. And from our apartment, we could see ice and snow everywhere. But it soon changed, and spring came along. And this is Sulin here with our eldest, dearest daughter, Lian, who was a cute little baby. And soon summer came, and we saw roses. Amsterdam had one formidable person, a bit Danaraj-like, and that was Professor Guido Teithardt, Professor and Chair of Gastroenterology at the Academic Medical Centre, University of Amsterdam. Guido was also a formidable-looking fella, but once he introduced himself to you and told you, please don't call me Professor Teithardt, call me Guido, you knew that he was actually a very warm person and had a very, very good heart. And when I first met him, maybe the first or second occasion, he'd been so focused on publishing and research and all that, told me straight away, by the way, I reviewed your paper. Okay, which paper? And I recommended it for publication. And that was in the Scandinavian Journal of Gastroenterology, which at that time was quite a prestigious journal. And soon he shared with me, as well as every fellow in his department, you can do a lot of work. You may or may not be recognized for it, but when you publish it, it belongs to you forever. And this is a bit hackneyed amongst my unit because I keep on telling them very freely this same old thing that Professor Teithardt shared with me earlier. So when I came back, Professor Dean Anwar Zaini had already suggested that I should do an MD thesis. In fact, at that time, when I was a sabbatical and we communicated with par avion, airmail sort of letters, Professor Anwar already suggested that I should do a doctoral thesis. But Professor Tidehart was at my back all the time, despite me coming back here, again through par avion sort of airmail letters. And I decided to do a doctoral thesis based on quite a bit of work that has been done. And in 1996, I submitted it for examination. And this is in my acknowledgements. I stated that Guido's breadth and depth of knowledge and his dynamism was certainly awe-inspiring and infectious. It was through his insistence, encouragement, and overwhelming enthusiasm that I finally decided to embark on writing this thesis. During the time writing a thesis, I was at home. But I was at home and not at home because from the start, I always did my work at home rather than in the hospital or at the office. But although I was at home physically, most of the time my mind and spirit was working on the thesis. And I'm forever grateful to my wife. And at the time, my daughters Lian and Li Xuan was already born, not my youngest son, Li Han, that they had a lot of patience and love for me throughout the writing of the thesis. So with the thesis and the work that was done before, a whole slew of papers on Helicobacter pylori came out. And you may recognize some of them. But the key papers, as Joey has mentioned, was the paper that came out in European Journal in 2001, where Parasakti and I described the racial cohort theory, emphasizing the difference between Malay, Chinese, and Indian with H. pylori infection. And a second paper, which came much later in 2007, American Journal, which talked about the Indian enigma. We were the first to describe the Indian enigma, which is a play on the African enigma, trying to explain why Indians who had high H. pylori prevalence, but yet low peptic ulcer prevalence and low gastric cancer incidence. I presented my Sharan Pradana in 1999, not in this hall because this was not in existence, but in our lecture hall 2. And the title of my lecture is Germs and Human Stomach, the Helicobacter pylori Story. And this is a picture of me, my wife, and my elder daughter, Lian. You can see she's a big girl now, and my sister who had attended the lecture. Stomach 96 came along before that. Stomach 96, and Dato Kanda, if he's here, was the organizing chairman, Andrew Chua, secretary, and myself, the scientific chairman. Ms. Kong will know this well. This was our first international meeting, our first foray into international meetings for the Malaysian Society of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. I can't find any of the brochures that we had. I didn't keep any of them, but only the file, the working file that I had as scientific chairman. Dato Kanda is now master of the Academy of Medicine. Dato Kanda is a wonderful man, a real gentleman. He was the upper GI consultant and chief of upper GI surgery and general surgery in Ipoh Hospital. Kanda, through his leadership, we managed to organize this first meeting. And this is the lecture notes that we had, and you can see the whole list of invited speakers that we called for this meeting. And shortly after that, we organized an even bigger meeting, the second Western Pacific Helicobacter Congress in Kota Kinabalu. And this was with the great help of Dato J.R.M. Menon, my good buddy and friend. And we organized this meeting calling almost everybody who's who in the Helicobacter pylori field or fraternity. And this was a very, very successful meeting. 86, we started H. pylori Research Group, and with my close friend and collaborator, Professor Parag Sakti. She has now retired and gone to Sunway Medical School, and Mr. Mani is still here, Mrs. Chong is here, and Encik Amin is still working in the virology lab of University Hospital. This research group has changed and transformed to a much bigger group. In 2011, the UM Marshall Research Centre was started, and I'm no longer the chief of the research group. Professor Jamuna Vadivelu is, and we had a very important person standing right in front there, Dr. Lok from Singapore. Dr. Lok, PhD from Singapore, came to work with us for 5 years. And it was through his efforts that we had, the Marshall Center managed to produce many, many papers. Helicobacter has now become a human microbiota, and you can see that up to this present time, this is just a few days ago, we are still sending in papers in. The group is sending papers in. This one is a paper that's sent in that's rejected. Barry Marshall became a good friend. As you can see, he and Adrian Marshall has come to visit us several times, and a picture with me and Sulin. He has come to work with us and lectures in the Gastro Unit, and Barry is quite a special man, a very lateral thinker, more interested in computers and computer stuff, having fun with the GI fellows over dinner. But through it all, I've always been a clinician. And a clinician, you're always swamped by clinical work. It is a bane, of course, but really, it is also a boon. Because when you do clinical research, it is related to what we do every day. And oftentimes, clinicians always say, oh, it has already been written up. There's no point pursuing that path. There's nothing new. No one is interested. But the truth of the matter is that there is always something new. There is also something novel, interesting. And an interest can drop onto your lap. You have to read and you have to listen, and an idea has to be chased. So when you do clinical research, clinical observations are important. Then you move on to clinical experiments. But along the way, you have to think and reflect. But coming down to brass tacks, writing is a discipline. You cannot run away from it. Writing is a discipline. You need to find the time. Early hours of the morning, Saturdays, Sundays, public holidays, and you need to have patience and persistence. Therapeutic endoscopy is my other interest, and that again comes from my stint in Amsterdam in 1991. In fact, the main reason I went to Amsterdam was to do therapeutic endoscopy. And following my stint there, Dr. Tan Soon Seng, who is now in Subang Jaya Medical Centre, was there. Suresh Lakshmanan in Asunta also went for 6 months each. And Dr. John Cheng in 2000, Dr. John Cheng is in Kota Kinabalu, also in private practice. But Amsterdam was the mecca of therapeutic endoscopy then. Fantastic sort of place, because you could see so many therapeutic procedures being done there now. And this was the boss there, Kees Halbretser, and this is myself with a group of other therapeutic endoscopies, all from overseas. Kees Halbretser was a remarkable man. Totally different, totally opposite to Professor Guido Teithap. Quite laid back, quite easygoing, loves to eat and loves to drink, but what phenomenal skills he has. And if I may quote an article that I wrote, his sublime endoscopy skills, characterized by minimum movements, were designed to be maximally effective. He had a strong and stable left arm. That's why I tell all the ERCP trainees. And his calm upward demeanor belied an unflappable concentration and a deft touch. So working in Amsterdam was quite special. When you go there, Kees Halbretser will pull you to his room and he will tell you, you are specialists in your own country. Now you have come to my center. I trust all of you. There was, in general, not absolutely welcoming Dutch atmosphere. And the boss gives you a free hand. There's no need for written consent from patients. He does not stand with you, but he knows your progress all the time. So therapeutic endoscopy in Amsterdam at the time, they had 6 to 12 ERCPs per day. Cases come over from all over Holland by ambulance. All kinds of therapeutic procedures, including EUS, even those fledgling days. He had many people doing PhDs, and Professor Teithap gives lectures 6:30 a.m. every Wednesday morning. So when I came back to University Hospital Kuala Lumpur, I was, of course, full of enthusiasm and energy at that time. And we started slowly to introduce more and more therapeutic endoscopy procedures. We certainly did much more ERCPs and more effective ERCPs, did a lot of esophageal therapeutic work, And I also started doing a lot of pseudocyst drainage. And up to this date, up to this present time, until now, I'm told that it's not standard of care. I cannot drain pseudocysts. I drain at least 100 pseudocysts until this present time. Present time, standard of care, you must do EUS to drain pseudocysts. In 1998, we became a fully dedicated endoscopy unit, and that was in 4th floor Menara Timur. And we got the unit because of one man, Professor Said Nuri, who was Timbalan Pengarah at that time, as well as head of surgery. It was thanks to Said Nuri that we got this first unit in the first place. And then on top of that, we had a digital fluoroscopy unit, all on our own, despite the protests from the head of radiology at that time. So it was a proper unit. We had registration, we had reception, we had filing places, and latterly we had computerization records and printed reports as well. 30 working sessions per week, about 5,000 procedures a year. And these are the pictures of the endoscopy unit in Menara Timur. But after many years, in the late 2000s, I found that the endoscopy unit was getting small. And I started asking for a new place. And at the time, the planning for Menara Selatan had come up. And I wanted a full floor in Menara Selatan, but that was not given to us. I was told that you have to share it with your brother, half the floor. So we took the bigger half of the floor. He took the smaller half, the floor. But nevertheless, we are most grateful because this unit in Menara Selatan is indeed a very beautiful unit. A wonderful unit. 6 working rooms. We have a digital flat panel fluoroscopy machine, linear and radial EUS, washing and storage areas, a spacious recovery ward, and we are doing up to 10,000 cases per year now. And you can see the pictures here, our fluoroscopy room and our Hall of Fame, Corridor of Fame, so to speak, and other working rooms as well. As the unit developed, our assistants also developed. We had a small group of GI nurse assistants that has now increased and transformed to a large group of almost 30 nurse assistants and support staff. We had formidable, very strong head nurses. Miriam C. was our head nurse from 86 to 2005. Sister Mary Bong from 1998 to 2005 was our nursing sister and nurse manager. But sadly, she had to leave us because of financial reasons to migrate to Australia. Within 3 years of migrating to Australia and working at the Westmead Hospital in Sydney, Australia, Mary Bong has now become the chief nurse. From 2008-2009, Mary Bong has become the chief nurse and an indispensable member of the unit in Westmead Hospital. The endoscopy unit has grown. We are a huge unit now. And this is a recent picture of the combined endoscopy unit taken in April 2016 before our latest workshop. To be a teacher and mentor, to me, is a gift, is a privilege, and is a joy. This is a picture of me with some undergraduate students, which I've enjoyed teaching for so many years. And in the early years, I don't know if there are any old students here, Awang may know, I was very gratified because you all voted me best lecturer of the year so many years in a row until I was a bit embarrassed. From 2005 to 2006, every year they all voted me as best lecturer, and I attend your MedSoc annual dinner. So I was a little bit embarrassed. Why don't you give to somebody else? Because every year you voted me as best lecturer. More recent years, most of my mentoring and teaching has been in gastroenterology and in GI endoscopy. And this picture taken some time ago shows many of my trainees, many of our trainees here from Mauritius, from Indonesia. Juanda Hartono now works with Lawrence Ho, and we have Professor Tan Tan Ai here. She's professor at University of Rangoon at Sanpia Hospital. She also spent 6 months with us. The endoscopy unit has grown from strength to strength. Mentoring is the greatest reward when you see students and fellows doing well and better than you. And none is a better example than with Awang Bulgiba. Awang, you were a student with me in 3rd year in Klang, and I used to drive you all up and down. Oh, no, only the girls. I didn't drive you, Awang. I only drove the girls. Yeah. And this is a picture taken recently of Awang. Awang, as you know, is my boss now. Is all our boss now. And I have other, these are a few of my more senior trainees, Dr. Tan Yen Mei, Ranjiv, and the late Salim Omar. When Ranjiv left for private practice, Dr. Panirchilvan told him, Ranjiv, you owe KL Goh big time. You must give him royalty on every case you do. Ranjiv has never given me any royalty. The only thing he has given me is sends cases to me that are impossible to do, or send cases to me when he's off for a nice meeting overseas, and then Ranjiv will call me up, hey boss, can you take over this patient? We have had long-standing workshops at the University Hospital, UMMC, from 1993. This is the pride of our activity in GI Endoscopy Unit, and you can see that we have called many people over the years. All are top-notch therapeutic endoscopists. And you can see the faces here, Professor Rob Horst, Nip Sohendra, Chris Williams, Paulo Sakai, Tajiri, Professor Exxon, David Carlock, Jerry Way, Yoshiro Sakai, and Peter Cotton. We have enjoyed organizing these workshops, and this is from our latest workshop, and this is from an earlier workshop. We have had Professor Lawrence Ho come here many times. Lawrence, we never forget what you tell us. Anytime you hold a meeting in Malaysia, I'm a typing boy. I will never say no. So we always count on that, and we always remember that. Oh, Lawrence Ho, he will always say yes. So we always call Lawrence Ho, and this was a meeting in 2005 with my good friends, Jerram Menon. Jerram, you're here. Robert Ding, Andrew Chua, and with another faculty, Dr. Bjorn Rembecken from Leeds. And this is an older picture with Dato Mehta, Professor Dato Jerram Menon again, and Professor Sidney Chung, who was the head of GI endoscopy at the time in the Chinese University, Hong Kong. And this is our group photo, our latest workshop, where we have Professor Jacques De Vere as our distinguished speaker, and Professor Nage Reddy, the president of WEO, in attendance as well. And as Joey showed, one of the earliest therapeutic endoscopy workshops I was involved in was with Joey. And thanks to Joey, he did all the work. And he put me as co-course director, and all I did was to show my face there. But we have Kees Halbretser come, and we have Nip Sohendra. And I think all in all, it was a truly wonderful workshop that we held in the Santo Thomas University Hospital in Manila. And we went to Hong Kong 2 years later, and you can see at that time even the Hong Kong workshop was a grand workshop, was a big workshop, and you could hardly see me. I think I'm somewhere to the left, and Joey is somewhere to the right. And this was at the dinner of the workshop with Joey and myself, me with very much more black hair at the time. I've had the privilege and honor of being invited overseas as well. Went to Saudi Arabia 1 year, the United States of America 1 year, and very latterly to Sao Paulo, Brazil, just beginning of this month. There are many other workshops, but some of the highlight workshops would be in Hyderabad, India. And there's this great man there called Nage Reddy, who has a wonderful setup, a wonderful therapeutic setup in the Asian Institute of Gastroenterology, and a good friend. I've been to his workshops many times, and Nage Reddy is a teacher and endoscopist par excellence, so you can see that we call him Maharaja Reddy. S.K. Lam, Professor S.K. Lam, OBE, was an important mentor for me. He was professor and head of medicine, University of Hong Kong, Queen Mary Hospital. He was the president of APAG in 2000 to 2004. But what was interesting was what caught his eye. What caught his eye was this paper that I had published in the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. I didn't think very much of this paper, and so submitted to the JGH, which was a lower sort of impact journal. But he thought that it was a great paper. He got an editorial written up for it, and then he got it translated and sent it to the Chinese version of JGH. But since I caught his eye, he started getting me involved in many Asian Pacific activities. One of which was the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology, which I became editor at a fairly young age. And here there's a picture of him and Kunio Okuda, who was the founding editor of the journal. And it's interesting to note Professor Ian Roberts Thompson is at the back. Professor Ian Robert Thompson is the treasurer of the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology Foundation. The JGHF Foundation, for those of you in GI fraternity, is a very powerful body in terms of money. We have no input at all in editorial activity, but we disburse a lot of money every year to the whole Asian Pacific region, and I'm the chairman of the JGH Foundation until the end of this year, when my good friend, Professor Ian Roberts Thompson from Adelaide, will take over. The JGH is an important organization that has pushed gastroenterology and hepatology and GI endoscopy in this part of the world, and none more so that has contributed is Professor Jeff Farrell, who is now retired but maintains a research facility in Canberra. And this is a picture of Jeff Farrell. And another person who was very important is Professor Neville Yeomans here, pictured together here with Joey and myself a couple of years ago. Neville Yeomans, founding professor of Western Sydney Medical School, long-time professor of University of Melbourne. Neville Yeomans was my predecessor as JGHF chairman. The highlight of my activities in the Gastroenterology Fraternity Association was the Asian Pacific Digestive Week in 2010. It was a big event, and we thought that it went very well, and we were proud of it. We all worked very, very hard. Many of us worked very hard. And this is a picture of the committee here. And you can see amongst the people involved, Dato Kanda, Dr. Jayaram, who was the deputy organizing chairman. Dr. Tan Hak Ju is here, who was hardworking secretary. But there was one particular person who had to work very hard. He was the young Sanjeev Mahadeva, who was the deputy or assistant scientific chairman. As he was a younger fella, the older fellas in our committee, and he had the obsessive neurotic trait about him. We tortured him incessantly, and but we have to say that he did a good job and deliver his work. Barely 6 months later, we organized another big meeting, because by that time I was president of APAG, and we had this Helicobacter pylori Congress. And this picture shows the whole Asian Pacific Association Council come together in KL, and this is the only group picture we have of the Asian Pacific AG Council at that time. I would like to turn next to another important personality in Asian Pacific gastroenterology, and that's Joseph Sung. Professor Joseph Sung is now still President and Vice Chancellor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. At that time, when we first knew him, he was just a lecturer and then associate professor and professor at the Department of Gastroenterology. These are pictures taken when he was Vice Chancellor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Both Joey and Lawrence, we had the opportunity to visit him as work, and then we would always end up in the Vice Chancellor's house. It was a lovely house, not too ostentatious, but on the top of the hill. And of course, he has, well, like all professors in Hong Kong, the least they should do is they don't drive a Myvi, okay? The least they would drive is either a Lexus or a Mercedes. And this Mercedes is Joseph Sung's G.I. Joe Mercedes. And this is us, the pictures of Joey and Lawrence as well, having dinner in the Vice Chancellor's house. And that is Mrs. Dr. Rebecca Sung as well, whom I'm teasing or admonishing or chatting, I'm not sure. What do we need when we do all this work is a motivation and a drive. When you start off, you need to have the motivation and drive to be good in what you do and to rise above mediocrity. But to me, there are three issues that underlie whatever you do. You must be honest, because honesty underlies everything. You need to have hard work. I'm one of those who thinks that working smart is a bad word. And humility. You need to be humble, because if you're not humble, you do not learn and you do not improve. You need to be willing to go one step further, always. You cannot be timid. You must be persistent and you must be innovative. You need to have the confidence and the belief. It's not a question if you will succeed. You must and you will succeed. And if you do something well, at the end of the day, you will enjoy it. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, last few slides, epilogue, my wife and family. My wife, Sulin, has been the bedrock of my life. Without her, I would not have achieved anything that I've achieved today. And our family, we took a long while, if Vaikunta knows, we took a long while in getting the family going, but in the end, we are truly blessed. We are truly blessed with a wonderful family. 3 wonderful children. Our eldest, Lee Ann, is a doctor in UK now. Lee Xuan is final year chemical engineering UCL. And Lee Han, who is here with us, is first year medicine in University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. But they have grown up. They have grown up too fast. They have grown up too fast. And it is almost impossible to get a group photo. You can see that when I was searching for photos, this is the last group photo we had in 2014. And since then, the family, it's almost impossible to get the family together at the same time. We still enjoy playing games together. Tennis is the family favorite game. It turns out that all 3 of them are very good with tennis, and they played competitive tennis when they're in school. But nowadays, when they come back, the favorite game is badminton over the gate. And this again, nowadays, we don't play doubles because not everyone comes back at the same time. So it's playing badminton over the gate, singles only. So as the children grow up and leave home, it's only the 2 of us. We spend more time together, drinking here and eating as well. There'll be more time for friends, Joey here and Lawrence. So to you guys, if you call me for any talks, etc., the answer will be a yes, of course. Professor BJ has been my very close friend with Professor Gana Kumar, and we spend a lot of time. If you recognize this room, this is his room in the Department of Radiology, soon to be defunct, and he's going to be kicked out of this room. We call it the clubhouse. And BJ, who will retire very shortly also, we share many things about work and with family, etc. There are also friends, old medical school friends. Vai is here. Rahim, who is just next to me. Rahim is a good friend. He is now still Deputy Vice Chancellor in Masa University College. And Dr. Awal, who is consultant ENT surgeon in Damansara Specialist Hospital. But last but not least, Damien Wong. Damien Wong becomes younger as he grows older. And every time I see him, Damien, what's your secret? And he say, yeah, you come to the gym with me, and Vaikuntan is going to go to see him in Penang soon. And he say, come to the gym with me, but I spend 2 hours in the gym every time. Okay, so if you spend half an hour or 15 minutes, that's not good enough. So Damien is an example to us that as you grow older, you become younger. So that is 36 years of my life, or 41 years. Anyway, 36 years working. And I don't feel any older. And as I've said when I started, it only feels like yesterday that I came into the Faculty of Medicine and the University Hospital. I look forward to not retirement, but to a further 36 years of fruitful life. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Please continue. I'd like to hear more. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Goh, please stay on this stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our session, our occasion here. The next session will be the presentation of plaque by the various department and the university. First of all, I would like to invite the acting Vice Chancellor of University of Malaya, Professor Dr. Awang Bulgiba, to give away a souvenir to Professor KL Goh.
Thank you very much, Prof.
The next souvenir comes from the Department of Surgery. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Vigneswaran, the Head of Surgical Department of University of Malaya, to give a souvenir of present. The last person, yes. I'd like to, okay. Professor Sanjeev Mahadeva, the Head of Department of Medicine, my boss, gastroenterologist, to present the souvenir presentation from the Department of Medicine and also the Endoscopy Unit. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our session. I would like to invite the guest of honor to proceed to the fourth floor. We have a small tea break. And for everyone, of course. Yeah. I need to get a permission from the head of department, you see. Yeah, he's paying for it. Yeah. Fourth floor next to the synapse. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.